Hello, this is Alan Wheeler with a short video here with the title something like Two Tarot Decks Debate Hard versus Soft Polytheism. Uh, so lately on this YouTube channel, I've been addressing tarot and spirituality. So this is one more in that vein. And the small window here in my office at work, the sunlight is waxing and waning here in a sense, and so hopefully the light will stay good for us. I've got a candle burning and incense going here at my work altar, and my custom lately has been to introduce something from either my home or work altar before proceeding with the topic. And so here's an item. It's a doorstop, but spoiler alert for those who have not watched the entirety of Game of Thrones. There's a character with this name, Hodor. So those who have seen the show will be familiar with the science fiction almost element that came into play as a time loop was closed, as a prophetic character traveled back in time, and it was revealed that this character's name for many, many, many episodes or chapters, depending whether you read or watched the story, the name was revealed that he literally held the door at a turning point in the story. So this was given to me as a joke, but I keep it here on my altar because, like the character Sam in Lord of the Rings, I admire the humility and service of that character very much. So let's go on. By way of introduction, I came across an article, and the article said that the oldest polytheistic religion, which is Hinduism, has monotheism at its core, and the authors talked about the transcendent Godhead beyond knowing, the Om, that is impossible to comprehend for humans, and that the actually the Godhead that derives from that, with Vishnu and Brahman and Shiva, I believe it is, and the other deities which expand from there, have at this core or root or something beyond words, this unity. Well, the only comment I've ever had on my blog at WordPress came almost instantly, and the commenter accused me of being disingenuous, which of course means being tricky, not sincere, pretending not to know exactly what you're implying. And he said I was being disingenuous when I used the term monotheism. And he said there's no such thing, furthermore, there's no such thing as soft polytheism. So I replied that And I could understand that using the term monotheism, which I actually got from the other article, and just used probably not as accurately as it could be used. Um, Still, for me, the point was well taken. But for him, it was offensive. But I replied that he could use other terms for whatever that unity is at the core: monism, pantheism. It's supposed to be beyond expression anyway, I think. Uh, but to me, that core, that source, whatever that is, it acts as a root from which many uh, flowers grow. Or another analogy, a prism through which many colors diverge. So, um, watching a few videos and reading a few blog posts about um, polytheism, I see there seems to be kind of a range. And so, on the one hand, you have um, the idea that gods may be aspects of one god or psychological archetypes um, that spring out, or there are many facets of one jewel. And then on the other extreme, the gods are distinct and separate entities. And sometimes people seem to be saying that maybe the gods of all cultures are not equally real, or that um, they're the at least in a given locality or ethnic group, one version or one deity may be better than the others. And I may not be expressing this fairly, but maybe leave it to say that the gods are distinct, real entities. Um, that there's a animist almost sense in which there's gods, spirits, ancestors, demons, whites, and so on. Now, there may be, between the two extremes, there may be a integrational polytheism, um, or one that appealed to me was called polycentric polytheism, in which, like Indra's net, in which there's many jewels, and each jewel reflects every other jewel, like a mirror. Similarly, in polycentric polytheism, every deity, in a way, reflects every other, although whichever one you look at a given time, it's center, or they're all center. Um, Also, there's people who identify as eclectic polytheists, and so they may borrow from various traditions, and that may be fraught with difficulty, but may also have many advantages as someone forges their personal path. Well, with these ideas in mind, I decided to draw from the alchemical tarot to uh, be a proponent or describe some value or values of soft polytheism. And I drew from the Archeon tarot to do the same for hard polytheism. And the choice of decks was intuitive, but a little ironic in a way, because I would stereotype this deck, the alchemical tarot, as more scientific in a way, being alchemical, more principle based, abstract, and maybe that's actually appropriate. and the Archeon Tarot as more symbolist and mythic and metaphorical. Regardless, those seem to be the personalities of the decks for me, and I just happened to pick them to take sides in this question. So let's look at the 3 cards that I drew from the Alchemical Tarot to help me reflect on, or to remind me of things to reflect on about soft polytheism. The idea that there are many facets of one divine that we experience in polytheism. And the first card that I drew is called the Money Tree, but it's in other decks, we would call it the 9 of Coins or the 9 of Pentacles. And 9 is a number of self associated with the Hermit. It's also a divine number in many myths and stories. But this card tells me that one of the advantages or positive qualities of the soft polytheism is that there is a material payoff. And so if it's a pantheistic approach, that seems to work well for some people, you do have that earthy element and the idea that all is divine and that we can experience deity in the physical, in the cultures, and they may be different locations, different cultures, but we have the ability to access that fruit, which here is displayed like coins. However, we see that in those very physical manners, although the divine may be abstract at the core. So that's the first card. The second card is the King of Vessels, and this came up in a video recently on the King of Cups as atheist, and there I discussed more fully than I will here about how the card shows the self as the source of fulfillment, as the whale is filling his own cup here. We also see the self as sacred, so there may be a tendency in some to see the deities as reflections of the self, rather than literal entities. So I think this card gives an effective reminder. And then the third card is the 3 of Wands from the Alchemical Tarot. And let me just read, it's interesting, from the Little White Book. This card is called the Boat, which you can see here. The boat returns guided by its eye, a new wave, reinforcements, renewal, replenishment. And I do like that Robert M. Place himself used the word new wave because it is a more modern or kind of a progression, or I don't want to say better, but there certainly seems to be an evolution from the ancient way of looking at deity or polytheism. Also, just as usual, the card shows vision and power, that fire element. And I think it's a good picture that the 3 is manifestation in that fire element, but that kind of existential idea that we sometimes call panentheism. I think that deity is in formation, that we are co-creators, that the self helps to create and manifest at least the form of deity in different cultures and for different people. So that volition, that motivation, that fiery will, that free will is manifesting here, like the ship, and guided by its eye there. So those cards spoke very well. Ooh, a little cloud went over the sun there. Now let's turn to the Archeon Tarot in defense of hard polytheism, looking at the value and benefits of that approach. And the first card I drew was the Herald of Cups. And this, being a herald, this speaks to me of a literal calling, and how there's a sense of, I think, real messages being received from deity. There's a trumpet here. It may be hard to see in the corner, similar to the trumpet on the judgment card. And there's the similar angel wings to the figure on the judgment card, but of course holding a cup. And so this is in the that realm, perhaps of heart and relationship, and that part of the identity. But that spiritual calling, that spiritual heralding, is one advantage that I feel in at least experiencing deity as external, real entities, calling, guiding, and giving messages. The next card that I drew from the Archeon Tarot is the Chariot. And again, it's hard to see, but there's a figure. It almost looks like Isis with her spread wings here behind the sun. I don't know if that's the symbolism the author intended, but that's what I'm seeing there. And the charioteer is holding these horses, pulling almost in different directions, which is a familiar theme in chariot cards, here pictured by red and blue horses. And this speaks to me of the kind of the battle of maybe it's spiritual warfare, but the sense of opposition being part of the path, the meeting of challenges, the discipline required, the sense of power and victory, and I think of the Norse god Odin, other Isis, and other deity, that the Morrigan, who support the followers and devotees in battle, or call them to battle. And I think that the battle may not be physical today, but there's still that sense of, again, identity and defending and the discipline required. And I think that's a real value to the outlook, to the approach used in hard polytheism. The last card I drew from the Archeon Tarot was Death. And you can see the scythe perhaps here. At the top, the white skull wrapped in a black robe. It's a very dark card. But this speaks to me of, um, first of all, let me look at some notes here. Um, the willingness to face the darkness that I see in many pagan paths. In the Norse mythos, we have Ragnarok, um, the gods that went down at the final battle. The idea that destruction and death is really a part of the whole, part of the creation and life. I also see here um, initiation, and so um, kind of the sacrifice and some of the oldest aspects of religion, um, dying to the old life and taking on the new. And um, this is, I think, a very, even the blood sacrifices and things like that. This is a much older, primal uh, form of religion, and I think that's something that's lost in some more antiseptic um, versions of religion. So I think that's a very accurate card to draw and reflect on for hard polytheism. So hopefully without doing too much damage to ideas and paths that may have differences, I think hopefully the two tarot decks have provided more of a dialectic than a debate, as stated in the title. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you feel connection with people in your life, with online community, and on your spiritual path, whatever that may be. Take care.